Okay, I'm back. I've had a cold from hell, but I'm getting better now, and I think you may hear it in my voice that I've got a little cold left. But I hope you're going to hear what I'm saying anyways. Because in this video, I'm going to show you how to build a JS slider with just using vanilla JS and no libraries and stuff like that. Because sometimes it's better to just build the stuff yourself if you just need something simple and don't have a complete library for that. And I'll show you in about roughly 60 lines of code how you can build this slider. So if we first take a look at what we're building here, it's a simple slider. As you can see, we're just changing images here, and you can also have some text. This is just regular HTML. So we're just creating a div here with some text in it. And we can go back and forth in this slider here, and it will rotate in infinity here. So it will rotate to the first slide when we reach the end here of this one. Okay. So this is quite simple, and many people use libraries for this one, and the libraries has a lot of functions in them, but maybe you don't want to use all of this. So you can just build yourself a slider with very little code, and I'm going to show you that now. First, make sure that you download the starter files in the GitHub link that are provided below the video. We're not going to build the CSS or the HTML structure in this one. I provided that for you because I want to focus on the JavaScript itself. So make sure you grab that before you start this course. And we can take a look inside our code that I provided for you. If you open it up, you're going to have a few folders in that one. There's a folder that's called Start Here, and you also have the finished slideshow in another folder, but you're going to use the one that's called Start Here. First of all, we have an image folder. There's some images. I just took them from Unsplash, so you can use whatever images you want, of course. Then we have a source folder, and this is where our script is going to go, or JavaScript. So that's the only file we're going to use for that one. And then we also have a style folder, and I created these styles for you, and it's about 130 rows of code or something like that. Because in this slider, I'm going to use CSS to animate it, so we're not animate it with JS. I'm going to apply different classes and remove them and create transitions that way when we flip through the slides. Okay, and then we have the wbn-slider.html file, and that's the file you use to start this up. So you can open up this in your browser and just show the slideshow there, as I did here. You can see that's the file I'm using here. Okay. And if we take a look at the HTML structure here, inside of the header here, I'm importing a font for the text for the slide I'm using here. And also in the body here, I have a div. The main div here is the slider itself. Then I create different slides here with the wbn-slide. If you wonder why I'm using wbn, it's for Weben. That's my last name. So I'm using this one often in my CSS classes when I do something like this. So I've created 5 different slides here. And as you can see, I also created a text for this one here with some gibberish text. It's lorem ipsum text here. And then I set this slide here to active, and that's the one that's going to show at first. Because when we show a slide, we're setting that one to active. And that's the class I have created inside of here. So in that class, I just changed the set index. So I make sure that that one is get positioned at the top of the stack of images. So this slideshow is not going to be a one where we have put all these images in a row in a very, very wide div. I just stacked them on top of each other here. So I'm just going to change the set index on them and also the animation depending on which button you press here. So I'm going to talk more about this when we create this in the JavaScript. And that's what we're going to be doing now. So make sure you're inside your code and inside the wbn-slider.js file. As you can see, I created a little comment here that says start here. So we're going to create a code inside of this event listener. And this DOM content loaded, make sure that the HTML is loaded and parsed before we start using any JavaScript. So that's why I've wrapped them inside of this add event listener. This will trigger when the HTML is loaded and parsed in our browser. Okay. So we have our structure here. We have our slides, so we can grab them inside of our JavaScript because we're going to modify them now. And we also have our buttons in our slideshow that we're going to grab here also. First, we're going to set a const, and we can call it slide time. I'm using capital letters here because this is a const that we can change here. So you can do whatever you want. There's different standards of this, and there's different preferences that people are using. I'm going to set it to 500, and that's half a second, 500 milliseconds. So we can change this one and change the speed of the slideshow later on. Okay. Then we're going to have a const that's called backBTN, or we can call it backButton. So we're going to grab our button in document.querySelector, and we grab the button, and it's called wbn-slider-back-btn. If we take a look inside of the HTML file, you can see it's the button here. So we're going to grab both of these. So back inside of JS file, we can just copy this one, paste in, and call this one forward button. And we're going to grab wbn-slider-next-btn instead. So that makes sure that we have our buttons inside of these variables here, or in consts. Then we want to grab all our slides. So we create another const, call it all slides. And we're getting DOM nodes here, but we want to convert them to an array so we can use it easily inside of our script. And yeah, I'm using ES6 syntax here. If you want to use this script in older browsers, you have to use Babel or something like that to transpile it down to ES5. But one way of converting the DOM nodes into an array with ES6 is using the spread syntax. So we create an array here, then 3 dots, that's the spread syntax. We're grabbing from document.querySelector, and we're going to use querySelector all for this one because we want all our slides. And we grab .wbn-slide. So we're grabbing all of our divs that has this class on it. And this will be DOM nodes, but we convert them into an array with the ES6 spread syntax. Okay. You could also use array.from, and then you just grab it inside of there, and that will also convert it to an array. If you want to do that instead. Okay. So we have our buttons and we have our slides. Now we're going to have a few variables here that we can change in our script. So we're going to have one that's called clickable, and we set that to true at first. And that's because I don't want user to be able to click here before the transition has ended. So we're going to use this later on in our script. Okay. Then we have one that's called active, and we set that to null. That's going to be our active slide that we put in this variable. And then we have one that's called new active. And you probably can guess it that that's the one that we're going to put our new active slide when we change slide. So let's go on with it. We're going to have a function that's called init_slider, like so. And as we're setting the slide time here, the transition time, we have to somehow apply this to our CSS inside our JavaScript, because I'm using only CSS to animate these slides. So we have to go through our slides and set this transition time to the CSS on each slide. So we can do that by looping through all slides, and we use dot for each. So we have a slide and then an arrow function. And for each slide, we want to set attribute. You can put it on a new row here. I want to set the style. We have a comma. And here I'm using backticks because this is a template literal. So inside the backticks, I want to set the transition, the transform. And we have a $, curly braces, because we can grab this variable inside of this template literal. We have our slide time. And ms, that's milliseconds, and we're going to have a little bit of easing on it. Okay, then we can take a new row here. And we want to set our animation duration to $, curly braces, and our slide time also. Okay, a little bit of auto formatting there. So this way we can set the style with JavaScript on each of the slide divs. And this is very handy here, because now we can just change this one and it will apply this CSS to our slides. So that's our init function. And before we create the actual slide function, we can set up our event listeners for the buttons. We can just make a little comment here, event listeners. Okay, then we have our forward button. So we set add event listener, and we're going to have a click on this one. Create an inline arrow function here. And we're going to create the function that's called change slide. And we're giving it a value that's true for this one because this is forward. We're going to have a parameter for this function that tells us if we're moving forward or backwards. So this one we're setting to true because we're moving forward here when we press the forward button. Okay, then we have our back button. We add an event listener with a click function. We create an inline function here. And we change slide for that one also. And we set it to false because now we're moving backwards. And that's why we send in false here. Then down below here, we can just init slider and init slider. So we start with this function here. Okay, so that's our event listeners for our buttons. And then we're going to add another event listener that's for our slides. When the transition ends, we're going to remove some classes on the active slide. But first, we're going to create our actual change slide function. So we have a new function called change slide. We have a parameter that's called forward. Okay. And then before we do anything here, I want to check clickable. If that one is true, then we can do something because we're setting the clickable to true when we want the user to be able to click on the buttons. Otherwise, we won't do anything here. So the first thing we do inside of this is set the clickable to false, because now we don't want them to be able to click. And that's because when we press here, I don't want them to be able to click here when we are animating stuff. That wouldn't look good. Then we're going to set our active to our active slide. So we grab from document query selector or active div. And as I showed you before in the HTML file, I'm setting this one to active. So this is the div we're going to grab for now. And we're changing this and put this active class on the current active div when we animate the slides. So this one will give us the active slide in this variable called active here. Then we want to grab our active slide index because we want to know what position in the array of all slides this one has. So we create a new const called active slide index, and we have all slides index of active. So this will give us back the index in the array where this active div exists in the array. Then we have this parameter here. So we check if we're forward, if we're moving forward. And then we do some stuff. Else, we do some other stuff. Okay. So this is where our logic is going to be for the different buttons. One for the forward button and one for the back button. All right. So we can start off with the forward button. And I want to show you this in detail, so I'm going to console log out a few stuff here so we know what we're doing. First of all, we're going to console log our active slide index. And of course, we have that one in the active slide index variable. Then I'm going to console log the length of the all slides. And I'm going to show you this in a second. And lastly, I want to console log out our new slide. And this one is going to be the active slide index +1. And then we have modulus, all slides, and the length. And this one is going to be the heart of this. So I'm going to explain this real soon. But first we can take a look at our slideshow here and just see that we're getting something console logged out here. Yeah, as you can see, we get it console logged here. This one won't give us anything. And this one is, yeah, that's strange. It shouldn't be undefined. That's because I misspelled this one, length. I also misspelled this one here on back button. Change slide, like so. Then I can reload this one and see what we've got. Okay, yeah. Nice. So we have the active slide index, it's 2. We have the length of the all slides. We've got 5 slides in total, and the new slide is going to be 3. And here it's doing nothing because we haven't done anything there yet. Okay, back inside of our code. So we're going to create a new active slide, and we're going to set this from the all slides array. So we have all slides. And then we're going to grab an index here in this array, and we're going to calculate this index. And that's why I use this one up here. So we can just copy this one, paste it in here. So this is going to be our new active slide. So I'll try to explain this as good as I can, because this little formula here is going to give us the next slide, and it's going to rotate over the array for infinity. And that's what we're doing here with the modulus. We have our active slide index. We have to add 1 to this one, because obviously we want to go to the next slide here. And yeah, we could just use this and remove this one here, but that will not be good, because this way we can just go to the last slide in the array, and then it will give us an error, and we will be outside of the array. So that's why we're using modulus here. This will make sure that we can rotate the array. So when we're at the last slide, it will rotate back to the first index of the array. So I'm going to set some classes here, and then we can look at this again. On our active slide, we have classList.add. We want to add a class on this one. And I have one that's called SlideOutLeft. And on our new active, we also have a class list that we want to add class. We actually want to add 2 classes to this one. And we have one slide in right. And also we want to give it the active class. Okay. So on this one, you can see that I'm sliding out to left. And I'm just simply transforming this one of 100%. And that will make sure that it slides out to the left with its full width. So it will disappear out of the browser to the left. Then we also have to animate in the new slide that we want to animate in. So I have that one that's called slide in right. And for this one, I'm setting an animation, and I call it animate in right, because now I want to first animate from 0% and tell it where it should be at 0%. And I want it to be, here's the animate in right, and I want it to be translated to 100%, and that will make it placed outside the screen to the right. And then I want to animate it into 0%, and that will make it slide into the middle. So that's why I'm using a keyframed animation here, because I want to set 2 points where this div should be. This one, when we slide out to the left, the active one, it's already in focus on the screen, so we can just animate it out to the left. But the other one, we move it first outside of the screen to the right, and then animate it in from the right. So this is how we kind of change the stack order of the divs that's currently stacked on each other. So make sure you save this one. We can go back inside of our browser, reload this one. And you can see it works here, but it won't work now because we haven't set our new classes when this transition has ended. But we can at least change one slide. Okay, back inside of the code. As I told you, we're going to set another event listener down here. And we have to set an event listener on all of the slides. So we have all of our slides in this all slides array. And for each of these ones, we have a slide, an inline arrow function. And we're going to add an event listener on each slide. And this one is going to look for something that's called transition end. So every time a transition end on these divs, it will trigger this function. So we have an inline function here. We're actually going to have 2 triggers on this one, because we have the active slide that's animating out, and this one is going to trigger. And then we have the new slide that's animating in, and we don't want to do this 2 times. So first we have to check if slide equals to active. We just want to run this one when the active slide has animated out itself. And then we also check we don't want it to be clickable here. Okay. In this one, we check if the slide is the active slide, and we also check that we still not yet has set this one to clickable, because we're going to set that one to clickable now. So we set it clickable to true. And then we're going to change the active class names. So active.className, and we can just set it to WBN slide. This will make sure that we wipe out the other classes and it will just have this class. So that's exactly what we want. Do a little auto formatting there. So we can save this one and see if it works. I reload it and we try to click. Okay, did I get some strange thing here? Yeah, don't know what that is. Remove this one and auto format it and save it back inside of the browser, reload. And as you can see, it's changing now. And you can also see the things like console logged out here. We have the active slide index, it's 3. We have the all slides. The length is going to be 5 because we have 5 slides now. And the next slide is going to be 4. So if we press this one, you can see that it changes to the active slide index. It's 4 now. And the new slide is going to be 0. And this is thanks to the use of modulus that I showed you. So it's going to rotate this array forever now. And that's great. Okay, so that's one direction. We also have the other direction. We want to be able to go back also in our slideshow. And I think actually we can remove this once now. So we remove the console logs. And inside of the else block here, we're going to write our code for the back button. So just as before, we set our new active. We have our all slides array. And for this one, we have to do it a little bit different. First, we're going to have our active slide index. And in this case, we want to subtract it with 1 because we're going back now. But when we go back in the array, we have to actually add the all slides length here, dot length. And then we have to have the modulo and the all slides length. Otherwise, it won't work. So it looks a little bit different here in this one. So this is the way you do it when you go backwards instead of forward. It's a little bit more complicated to adding this here. But yeah, I think if you console log it out as I showed you before and just try to understand what it will do here and try it with different values, you'll see how it works. So we keep it inside of the boundaries of the array by using modulus as we do in this function. Then we're going to set some classes, active.classList.add. For this one, we're going to have one that's called slide out right, and make sure you have the casing correct here, otherwise it won't work, because I pre-made these classes and they're named exactly as these are. And then also we want to set our classes on the new active.classList.add. This one is going to be called slide in left, and also we're setting the active on this one. Okay. So that's all there is to it. We can save this one and hopefully it will work. We reload it. We go forward, make sure that it rotates nicely here. Then we go backwards. Make sure that it rotates and it seems to be working, and that's great. And there you have it. Roughly 60 rows of code. That's all that you need to create a slider like this. And we're doing all the animation with CSS. No advanced JavaScript stuff or something to animate this. We're just changing the stack order of these slides and make sure that they animate in and out. And I encourage you to check out the style.css file if you're interested in to see how I animate this. I'm changing the set index on the active class here, so I'm setting that one to be on top. And then I animate in and out stuff here with just some few lines of CSS code. Yeah, and this is not adapted for responsive layout. You can do that also, of course, because this one is just HTML and CSS. So you can do whatever you want with these ones. All right. That's our slideshow with just 60 rows of JavaScript code. And I think, yeah, it's actually 61 now. But if we do like this, We have 60 rows of JavaScript code, and there's also a few comments thrown in here. So if you remove these ones, it's actually less than 60 rows of code. Okay, hope you learned something in this one. And yeah, I think the biggest learning in this one is that you don't need to have big libraries to do small stuff. If you don't want to use some advanced functionality that's in different libraries that has a lot of stuff in it.